In this video, we're going to consider the movement of water throughout a whole plant. And when we're thinking about that, we are instantly reminded of xylem. And xylem is, as you can see, starting down here in the roots, in the center of the root, coming from all different side roots, and supporting the center of the root and anchoring the plant. And then it moves to the edges of the stem, so you can see it going up either side of the stem here and branching sideways to form the veins in the leaves. So that's the xylem, that's the structural tubes that are going to be carrying the water around our plant. So xylem is once living cells whose walls have been thickened with lignin, which is a type of carbohydrate. You mostly meet lignin when you think about wood, but it's that's the same chemical, and the tubes, the cells for the xylem become so thickened that they actually become waterproof and the contents of the cell dies. So you end up with a hollow straw-like structure connecting the whole plant together. So that's what xylem is. The other thing we need to think about when we're thinking about water is that there are two main uses of water within plants. Obviously, we have cells that are using water for photosynthesis. So in the leaf itself, and that's why I've colored it green here, we've got photosynthesis happening in the palisade cells and the spongy cells, or any cell with chloroplasts in it, really. The other use for water is to maintain turgidity. So I'll pop this over here because it's kind of near what the stem would be doing. So it's maintaining turgidity. Turgidity means rigidness, uprightness. The opposite of turgidity is flaccid. That means floppy, it bends over. So you want a plant to be turgid, well supported, all the leaves to be held out so that they can absorb the maximum amount of sunlight. So these are the sort of background ideas as we think about the movement of water. So we could start at the leaf, we could start at the root. We really need to tell a story. I think we're going to start in the root. So the first thing we have to think about is what's going on with water in the soil. It needs to enter the roots. So we've got water coming from the soil going into the root cell. So because it's the movement of water across a cell membrane, it's by osmosis. And because root hairs, which are on the surface of root cells, root hairs actually have a really large surface area. So this ties into our understanding of diffusion. If you want to have maximum amount of diffusion from an area of from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration, you need to have a large surface area for this to happen. So root hairs provide that. And then once inside the roots, water can move from cell to cell along the root, just traveling by osmosis from one cell to the next cell to the next cell, moving from where there's lots of water to where there's not a lot of water. Sometimes this movement can happen not within the cell, but along the cellulose cell walls. But how it moves isn't really as important, but eventually it gets to the xylem. And once it gets into the xylem, the water travels really quickly up the xylem in what's called the transpiration stream. So the water is going to move quickly up the xylem. So we've just come across this idea called the transpiration stream. That means that something must be happening at the top of the plant to be providing a suck or a pull up the plant. So let's move into the leaf and see what's happening. So in the leaf, we know that there are holes, especially on the underside of the leaf, which is why I've got this leaf kind of flicked over slightly so you can see the underside. And water vapor in the air spaces of that leaf, it's really humid in there, and that water vapor is leaving through the holes that are open. And the holes are open really to let CO2 out, but water vapor is leaving too, because water vapor is a gas, and it's just diffusing out of those air spaces through the holes and into the atmosphere. So on a nice dry day, it will disperse really quickly. How does the water vapor get into those air spaces? Well, it comes from the leaf cells themselves. So inside the leaf, there are lots of cells that are contacting air spaces and they are just evaporating water from them. And so as each cell humidifies the air spaces around it, it's going to cause a bit of a suction on the xylem. And that xylem is going to provide water for the cell next to it. And the water will move and then evaporate and into the airspace and out of the leaf. And that's causing more of a pull from the xylem. So if we think about this whole pattern that we've managed to create here, we start at the top this time, we have water vapor leaving the leaf space. We have cells that are contacting air spaces inside the leaf drying out, essentially. And as they dry out, they cause their neighbour to feel a pull. So by osmosis, the water moves into them. And then those cells next to it, they have lost some water. So they get some water from their neighbour. And eventually one of those cells is next to the xylem. And the xylem provides water to that cell. And now we are creating a suction, like sucking on the top of a straw. And that's what is causing the pull up the stem by the transpiration stream. And that is then having a knock-on effect in the roots because water is being pulled through into the xylem from each root cell, and the roots are getting their water from the soil. So this whole thing is called the transpiration stream. So transpiration stream. So transpiration is the evaporation of water from the leaf, and the transpiration stream is the pulling of water up the stem from the roots. That's how water moves through plants.